Hey guys, it's Alana, and you're listening to Seeing Other People Unfiltered. It's Thursday, so that means real-life daters are coming on to share their real, sometimes shocking, and always unfiltered experiences. Think you're alone out there? Think you're the only one whose ex hooked up with your mom or whose last date ended up being a catfish? Think again.
My name is Danielle. I am a public speaker. I live in New York City. I'm 26 years old, officially since last week. Go Leos. And I'm here to talk about how I quit my toxic ex-boyfriend and my toxic boss in the same day.
Which honestly is one of the most badass, empowering things I've ever heard in my life.
Thank you.
I can't imagine, and you'll take us through that day, but I can't imagine how that felt and how much of a weight lifted off your shoulders you felt.
Incredibly freeing. Like, there were so many possibilities afterwards, and exactly, just like a weight lifted off, a huge weight. Or two.
So proud of you. When did this happen?
So this happened in 2020.
Okay. Whoa. Big year also.
Yeah, huge year. I was like depressed AF from my toxic job and like the state of the world and graduating into a pandemic. And it was really a tough time, obviously, for a lot of people. Plus I was living with my parents at the time. And it was just not a good time. Yeah.
So, okay. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with toxic job or toxic relationship?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we'll start with the relationship because it happened first.
Okay.
So I've actually never publicly spoken about this, but I figure like it's part of my story and therefore it's important for me to share. Because he was a huge part of who I am today. And so, yeah, in high school, I started dating someone, and right off the bat, a few of my friends kind of shared that they were a little bit concerned and they weren't like totally on board. And I think that was probably red flag number one.
Did they express why they were concerned?
Because he had cheated in the past.
Okay.
Yeah. And I chose to move forward because obviously when you're met with resistance instead of support, you then run towards the thing that's bad for you. And that's what happened. So we ventured into this relationship. Obviously, 8 months later, I mean, this was my senior year of high school. 8 months later, he cheated on me. Maybe fewer. I think maybe like 6 months later. And I found out, it's like kind of the craziest story of how I found out.
You have to tell us.
I love telling this story because it's like legitimately insane. So I was on a trip called March of the Living, which is, you're visiting the Auschwitz and all the other camps in Poland. And then you go to Israel right after. And it was a high school trip. And a few people from my high school were with me. At the time, back at school, because this was still happening during school, where it was like senior year. No one was doing anything. Everyone was downloading this app called After School.
Okay.
And this app was basically Yik Yak. So,
oh my God.
But like specific to your high school.
Oof, okay.
So there were crazy things on there, like freshmen getting with seniors, like it was like crazy stories. And half of it felt like it was made up by AI. Like it didn't feel true. And so I took everything on there with a grain of salt. However, we landed in Israel, and that first night I got a text from my then boyfriend being like, don't go on the app. Like, people are spreading lies. And I was like, what do you mean? So obviously I go on the app, and it says I hooked up with insert his name, and he has a girlfriend with a little devil face emoji. And I was like,
oh my God. And don't go on the app.
Don't go on the app.
Don't go on the app.
It's lies. And I sort of had this moment of, well, why would I believe this app? Like, it's anonymous. Like, people could make things up for any sort of reason. Like, there's fake stuff on there anyways. And I said to myself, like, this is so stupid. And brushed it off.
Okay.
And so a few days later, a friend of mine came to me, and she was back at the school, and I wasn't, and I was still in Israel. And she told me that this girl from her grade hadn't been to school in a few days.
Oh, God.
And on the other side, I'm hearing from my boyfriend, oh, I'm going to the principal. I'm having him tell everyone to delete the app, like alerting all the parents, making a whole big deal, like campaigning for this app.
Right, like, why is he suddenly the president of like
Suddenly
being
the
good
president.
and not spreading rumors and like no bullying or gossip or drama?
And he kind of was the bully at the time. Like he was not a good student. So it was a little bit out of character and it raised some flags. And so anyway, fast forward, I wake up one morning, I think it was like the second to last morning of the trip, with a text from him being like, I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I kissed this girl that hadn't been to school in the past 3-4 days when I was back in New York, like while I was here, and the night of a party that she threw that we were both at.
Oh my God.
Where we had a conversation about breaking up for the first time because of college, right? And it didn't end well. And
was she not going to school because of this?
Yes.
Because of the app.
So
and
it came out later that he was threatening her and saying, if you come to school, like, I'm gonna do something. I don't even know what he was saying.
You weren't even there.
I wasn't even there.
You weren't even there for her to like pull you aside.
Yeah, but he was scared that she was gonna tell people.
Yeah.
Because people at school were talking about all this stuff.
Right.
So anyway, that night, like, I held on to the secret alone. Like, I didn't tell anyone on the trip because I, again, was feeling shame.
Right. Because at first you're giving him the benefit of the doubt and you're like, no, like, I trust the person that I'm with. And now you're like, oh, well, actually shame on me for trusting somebody when everyone else said don't trust this person.
Yeah. And I was with people from my high school. Like, it was just really awkward. And I felt a massive amount of shame. Anyway, I go through the whole day. And that night, that friend that told me the girl hadn't been to school in a while, she called me and she said it was more than just a makeout. And they actually did the dirty that night.
Oh my God. And he's telling you now, he's saying we just kissed.
Yeah.
We kissed.
Yeah. And I was, that day, I was like, okay, like, I guess I could forgive him.
Right.
Because it was just, a kiss.
Oh my
But then she told me that. And then I called him out. And I was like, does your mother know that you did this? Like, I went off on him. And I said, like, we're over on the phone, right? It was like 12 o'clock at night. And I said, is there anything else I should know? And he said, no, it was only once. The next night, I get a text from him saying it was more than once. It was multiple times. While both I was in the city and also while I was away in Australia right before this trip on vacation with my family, visiting my sister. And yeah, and I came back and no one talked to him. Like, I didn't talk to him. We like never, and he kept kind of trying to mend things with me. And the night of our high school graduation, we met up in Central Park. So we're in Central Park and we rekindle things.
Walk me through your thought process of walking to meet up with him. Like, what were your intentions with this meetup?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I was watching a show recently where it was Love Island, UK. Mm-hmm. And there was a moment where this couple, Mimi and Io, who like had dated, like, she wanted to talk to him and kind of just like clear the air and like close the chapter. And they had both moved on. Like, it was like whatever. And she wanted to have a conversation with him. So she invited him to the terrace.
Okay.
And we all kind of know what the terrace means. And she was also hiding. Like, she didn't want people to know that she was up there. But she wanted to have a private conversation with him away from everyone.
Yeah.
And so you could imagine, I get back to school. Everyone is talking about this. We are in like graduation practice. Like, everyone's talking about it. Like, we're second semester, senior year, we're about to graduate. And this is all people can talk about. This is the
talk of the
town.
This is the story.
This is the story. I mean, it's like the best story. I don't blame anyone. So I feel like I don't owe him anything. But I'm kind of curious to hear, like, what does he have to say for himself away from everyone? Mm-hmm. I didn't go in with the intention of rekindling anything with him. I was furious. Like, he had just cheated on me and like lied to me multiple times. And you're also dealing with a 17-year-old girl who was in love, actually in love, what I thought was love for the first time.
Yeah. So you also probably wanted him to see how much he hurt you.
Yeah, for sure. Because I had to hold it together at school.
Yeah.
And that was really tough. I mean, I lost so much weight. I was the skinniest, like the lightest I had ever been. And I also had like body dysmorphia and like, I mean, I loved being that weight, but it also was totally trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you end up taking him back, getting back together?
That's a good question.
You're like still trying to figure that one out.
Still trying to, honestly, I mean, I think that it was a combination of wanting to feel the way that he made me feel again. Not that I felt super safe because it wasn't a good relation. Like, it was like, it wasn't a great relationship to begin with, but I wanted that sense of security of being in a relationship.
Yeah, and you justify like, well, the highs outweigh the lows, and the love I get from him is worth more to me than the tough parts. And what relationship doesn't have challenges? Like, you justify it over and over, and you convince yourself that this is worth it.
Yeah.
And that this is right.
Yeah. And, like, maybe, you know, it's the summer. Like, maybe we can have a great summer together. And maybe, you know, things will be great again. And I think I was definitely kidding myself. But at the time, I couldn't move on.
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing anything that summer. I mean, I was about to go to college. So there was also this point of, like, I was bored. Like, I didn't have anything else going on. And so I was still kind of wrapped up in the love that I kind of felt for him and the drama of it all. And, like, it was still so intense. So, yeah, I guess, like, the heat of the moment, I think, just, like, got to me. And we got back together.
Oh. And this lasted for a while.
So this lasted, we were like on and off for 5 years. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, 2 of those years we weren't talking. First year of college, like, we stayed together until maybe a few weeks into my experience at USC. I was like, once I got there, I was like, yeah, like, this isn't really going to work. But yeah, we were on and off, like every summer type of thing. We'd get back together. And then finally, I think it was like my sophomore year, I went to Israel for the summer and like completely cut ties for 2 years, two plus years. And then literally, I kid you not, the first time I came back to New York during the pandemic, because I was living in Connecticut with my parents and dealing with a toxic job. The first time I came back to New York and spent like a week here, I went to Central Park with a friend. Great lawn.
Oh, God.
We're sitting there. And all of a sudden, I see him walking towards us.
Oh, my God.
And I said to my friend, Juliet, shout out. I was like, that's him. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So, yeah, he ended up sitting down, like, and then we went for a walk after and just caught up.
And it all
came back. But I will say that was like the short-lived version, and that was towards the end of the entire thing. And since then, like, the door has been completely shut. I think he like doesn't even live in New York anymore. But that led me to the end.
Yeah.
And that, you know, month or 2 that we were seeing each other was really intense, and it also ended like in a really bad way. He ended up like kind of sexually assaulting my friend while I was there. Yeah. And obviously, like, we're not naming names, but yeah, it was, I was like, whoa, like, that's crossing a serious line. Even if it was like playful, quote unquote, like, that's not cool. a playful slap on the ass is like not to like with like to my friend is that's not cool.
Yeah.
So that was like the end. And then the following day I quit my toxic job.
Oh my God. Okay. So before we segue into the job, at what point did you recognize like this is a toxic relationship? Yeah. This is a bad situation. This is causing me so much more harm than good. Because when you're in it, it's impossible to realize. Because like we said, like you're justifying, you're making up excuses for their behavior, but you convince yourself and wholly believe like this is good.
Yeah. Especially when you go back to a person over time. Like I think you're under an impression that someone is giving you something that you don't have, that you want and that you think is good, right? This maybe it was an illusion of love. Maybe it was a false sense of safety. Maybe it was security of like saying like, oh, I'm in a relationship, because I am that type of person. I like being in a relationship. And I think a better part of me comes out when I am in one. But ultimately, I think it was my family didn't like him. My friends didn't like him. I lost a friend over him. I mean, he had cheated on me. And I think what's important, too, is to define a toxic relationship, because I don't think everyone knows the definition of one. So I would say a toxic relationship is one where your sense of safety, your sense of well-being is being compromised, your sense of happiness, too.
Yeah.
And also where that person isn't necessarily pushing you towards your goals and is maybe dragging you down. And where other people might be seeing that happen, and maybe they'll say something, maybe they won't. We can talk about that too. But I think that's sort of the bulk of it. So that's really like what I think a toxic relationship even is.
I really like the part you included about they're pulling you away from your goals rather than helping you get closer to them, because I think that's a huge part that people might not realize or look for, where it's like your ideal partner is going to support you, they're going to encourage you, they're going to challenge you for the better, they're going to know what you want, they're going to be your biggest cheerleader. And it's so subtle and it's so slow. But let's say you really wanted to go to grad school to get some degree, to pursue something that you're passionate about, and they're convincing you like over time, I don't know, grad school is really time consuming, like then when are you going to spend time with me? Or well, we had these trips we were going to take and you're not going to have all the time off, or like what am I supposed to do when you're at school at night? And they slowly start to take over those parts of your life and your time and your schedule, and they're in a sense controlling what you can and can't do.
Yeah. And parts of that did begin to show. So I mean, once I was graduated from college, I had a better sense of self. And what comes with that is when people try to dim your light, you're very sensitive to it. And so I remember there was a time where we were walking on the street and I saw this girl from high school, and she was kind of crossing the street, and we were also crossing the street, but on the other side, Manhattan. And if you know, you know. And we basically, I was saying like, oh, I want to say hi to her. Like I was about to say like kind of yell her name, not super loud, but like enough where she would hear it, where she's halfway across Broadway. And I started to say it, and he was like, no, don't do that. And I was like, why wouldn't I? Like I spent like 4 years, on student government with her in high school. Like, why would I not say hi? And he didn't have a good answer. And I sort of stepped back and I was like, whoa, like someone who I think I love is trying to dim my light for no apparent reason other than I'm embarrassing, or I didn't have any answer for it.
Yeah, because then it also makes you wonder, like, well, does he not want to be seen with me?
Right.
Or like, what's really the reason?
Right. Which, if you're with a cheater.
Right. Fact. And it's also, a lot of it's subconscious, where you could not even realize, like, now the next time you see somebody you want to say hi to when you're with him, you're actually not going to do it because you don't want it to strike up conflict.
Right. And that's not healthy.
No.
Not at all. Yeah.
Let's talk about your job.
Yeah.
Where to begin?
Yeah. I guess like so I'm going to try to make this story shorter. But I was in college. It was my first semester of senior year before the pandemic happened. So this was like 2019. And I was looking for an internship. I went to an event on campus and it was like a women leadership event. And I sat next to this woman who we like totally hit it off. And we were talking specifically about her startup, which, funny enough, was very, very similar to an idea that I had in my entrepreneurship class.
Okay.
That I didn't pursue because we went with like some other person's idea. But essentially it was like something I was passionate about. And it had to do with helping students figure out their path based on their experiences and interests and whatnot. And so I kept in touch with her. We like ended up getting drinks. And when we got drinks, she basically told me like her whole life story.
Okay.
Yeah. And
off to a not so promising start.
A little bit. It was a little bit like at the time I was like, wow, like she's gonna like change my life. And,
yeah,
like,
and she really
she's
trusts
like,
me.
Yeah,
and
she's
open.
like the first mentor I'm gonna have.
Mm-hmm.
Like I at the time too, like I didn't have really any mentors. Like I didn't really know what it meant to have a mentor, right? And like school doesn't teach you that stuff, which it should. But I at the time I was like really excited, and I remember calling my mom and just being like, she's gonna change my life. Anyway, I walk away from that experience and I was like, okay, like cool, like I know her whole life story now. And then a few weeks later she was like, all right, like come be an intern for me. And it was paid.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start my second semester of my senior year. At the time too, like I was going through like family stuff and it wasn't like the easiest time. But it was, you know, I felt like having an internship was a good thing and it was good for my resume and whatnot. So I start the internship in person at her house as the company HQ.
Mm-hmm.
And there were two other like full-time people that were like, you know, not interns. And so the first few months where I was commuting from school to her house like twice a week was great. Like I was getting that mentorship, like 2 hours, sometimes like a day. We would sit down and have conversations. I was doing marketing for her. And it felt really nice. Mm-hmm. And I was super passionate.
And you're making money.
And I was making money. And I ended up like kind of like maybe texting her ideas, you know, at night, or like being available at 10 o'clock at night, you know, to text.
Right.
And that wasn't appropriate looking back, given that I was an intern, given that I was still a student, given that like she was putting, you know, a lot of responsibility on me, which I appreciated at the time. But I think now I wouldn't have done the same thing. I would have had better boundaries between work and life. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward, the pandemic happens and we go remote. And now I'm back in New York and I'm working California hours in New York at her request, which meant 12 to 8, which meant I didn't really have a life. Mm-hmm. And that was really hard. So that was like kind of the first thing I was like, well, that's interesting. Like, I wonder if I could have different hours.
Right. This is also a 3+ you person company. Like, there should be more flexibility.
Yeah.
You're also going through a tough time. You're also still technically at this time supposed to be in school.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You hadn't graduated yet.
No, I was still doing classes. So yeah, I was doing school, all the things. And I end up being the manager of 10 interns.
Oh my God.
Because what she was doing was she was selling parents on an internship program for their kids to get experience for their resume if they had none. And she was doing the career coaching. So it was like a program, but the actual program was an unpaid internship.
Led by you.
Yeah.
An intern.
Yeah. So it was like very unethical.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And obviously like that's a red flag.
Did you feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the craziest part, like where I felt the most uncomfortable, was when her true colors started to show. When George Floyd happened, it was like that summer. And I said to her, like, oh, we should, as a company, like make a statement. Like there's all these companies, like big or small, like making statements about their commitments and, you know, just like posting something on social media, like a photo.
Which is like the
least you could do.
The absolute bare freaking minimum that anyone can do.
So I started sending her articles of like, oh, like Disney's doing this and Microsoft doing that and like all these different companies, just like to show her like what are the biggest leaders doing.
Yeah.
And she took it as like, oh, well, what about this other marginalized group?
Ugh.
And like kind of refused to post anything and make any kind of statement. She was like, well, we're helping these types of students. Like, anyways, like we're giving them an opportunity for an unpaid internship to work and get experience. And I was like, whoa, like she's gaslighting me. Like I felt like I was doing
She's
something
like,
wrong.
I'm a good person. I'm already doing my part to save and help the world.
Yeah. And like made it about her. She was like, my parents are immigrants. I was like, yeah, so is mine. But like,
so we're like a lot of people.
So are a lot of people's. Like,
that doesn't
like what does that have to do with anything? So that was kind of the first part that I was like, oh wow, like something's like wrong here. Like something's off.
Or like she's not the person that you thought she was.
Exactly. That too. Like she's not the leader I thought I thought that she was. So I guess for anyone else that that might be working for someone toxic, like it might be small things like that come up that are like, that's questionable. Like as a human being, you're making a questionable judgment that I don't really agree with. That is unethical, right? The company itself is unethical. So fast forward, I start to get called in by her, like virtually, about everything. If I'd make little mistakes, like grammar mistakes, like in captions, or my interns would, who were first-time interns, she would kind of throw a fit and direct it at me. Every morning we'd have a stand-up meeting, like 15 minutes. She would ask me to stay longer. It was 15, then it was 20, it was 30 minutes, and it was 45 minutes. And then she was saying things like, you know, if someone were to pay us for our time, they would pay you a lot less than they would pay me. Essentially telling me that my time is worth less than hers. And then she called me entitled because of the school I went to. So it was like a lot. It was a lot. And it was like over time, kind of breaking down, like, you know, my, like, breaking down my confidence in myself and making me question, well, are you really good at marketing? Or like, are you really good at leading these interns? Or do you really have an attention to detail? Which my attention to detail is not the best, but at the same time, it's like,
the worst.
Yeah, it's not the worst. It's like, it's not, and I'm doing great work. So I never got good feedback. I was constantly questioned, undermined. I was constantly, you know, I was also job searching to add on to it. And anytime I would bring up, you know, finding another job, she would either make me feel really bad about it and be like, well, what about the job that I'm going to offer you? And sort of dangling the carrot.
What about everything we've been through?
What about us? I know. Acapella girlies. I feel it. Yeah. It was kind of like that. It was like, well, like, what about me? Right. But
it's like, actually, you don't owe her anything.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what I realized.
Yeah, but it takes so much to realize that. And even to have the courage to look for other jobs when your confidence has been knocked down so much.
Right.
Like there are so many parallels between like a toxic work environment and a toxic relationship or situationship because they both eat away at your confidence. For so long, you've attached your worth to this thing,
100%.
whether it's the job or the person, and you've invested time and energy in both.
Yeah.
And it makes it feel like impossible to leave, or it makes it feel like you can't stand up to them, or you can't ask for what you deserve because do you even deserve it anymore based on how
Right.
they're treating you? It makes you
Right.
question otherwise.
And I think the big problem with graduating and going into work too is that you don't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what behaviors are appropriate and not appropriate.
Yeah.
And so it takes someone externally coming in and seeing that happen, which in this case was my coworkers, and then saying to you, well, that's not okay. Or I saw that she said that to you, like, are you okay? And validating the internal dialogue that is happening inside of you, because you're not always going to be sharing it with other people, especially because of that thing that we call shame.
Yeah.
And I see so many parallels between the high school version of me and the post-grad college version of me. You know, in that first relationship, first job, it's literally the same thing. I was scared to stand up for myself and believe that I deserved more, which I do, and everyone does.
Yeah.
But I think it's also the not knowing what to expect and not knowing what a healthy relationship or job actually looks like.
And feeling like you have so much to lose.
Oh my God. That was a huge part of it. I was like,
what if you quit and leave and then you're in the worst job market ever in the pandemic when everyone's getting furloughed and laid off and then you won't get a job?
Fear of retribution. I was scared that she was going to like take away any opportunity that came my way, or she was going to badmouth me. She was a recruiter too.
Ugh.
So I was like scared of that. Like I was relying on her for career support and like guidance. And, you know, she had told me, oh, you might be good at sales. Like you might want to check that out. And then I would bring up sales and she'd be like, oh, like how dare you, like kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then ultimately what got me to end that relationship was I actually had my brother-in-law to really lean on. They spent the summer with us in Connecticut. And he was hearing the things that I was going through. He was like, you don't really need her. Like, you can find someone else to go work for that will treat you right. Plus, I then sought out some of my parents' friends. Like, I didn't know who to go to. So I sort of thought back to the community that I came from. And I was like, oh, like, that parent. Like, I always kind of felt like a connection to that parent, right, for some reason. Or a family friend. And so I ended up reaching out to them, and every single person that I reached out to, including the director at Hillel at USC, every single person was like, you don't need them. Like that, you can move on from that. Like you have so much to offer the world. And if there's someone that you are allowing in your orbit, let alone working for, telling you otherwise, get the heck out.
It goes back to what you said about someone else dimming your light.
100%.
And holding you back from achieving your goals.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the time in high school, like after, I guess, college, I knew who I was. Mm-hmm. But then you show up to work and you don't necessarily know who you are at work.
Right.
And so that was the difference between me being able to recognize, oh, wow, this person's trying to dim my light. Let me get the heck out. Versus later on being like, oh, well, I mean, not much later on, about 24 hours later on, being like, oh, well, I don't know. Like, is this what work is or not? And ultimately what ended that was I sat down the day after breaking up with my toxic ex and I wrote a Benjamin Franklin list. And at the top of the pros of leaving were, you know, mental health going up, right? Mm-hmm. Being improving. And at the top of cons of staying is mental health going down. And so that was the wake up call. I was like, oh wow, like if I'm prioritizing my mental health and I'm that kind of person, which I am, then I can't stay.
It's amazing what writing it down and spelling it out, as simple as it seems, as silly as it seems, it holds you accountable.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, okay, I'm taking 5 minutes to do this exercise and I can see point blank what this is doing to me. And now that I've seen that, like, what am I going to do?
Yeah. It's like written proof. It's like, well, this is reality. Like, it's right in front of you on paper. And then once it's on paper, you're like, yeah, you can't ignore it.
Yeah. Wow. So how did you feel after ending this relationship once and for all, and after getting out of this job environment?
Well, I definitely felt stressed. I felt stressed not necessarily because of the relationship, but more so because of the job and the job market, graduating in the pandemic, and all my friends, their jobs were being pushed back. It was a really scary time. Luckily, I got a job 3 weeks later.
Oh my God.
At a startup that I absolutely loved, and that ended up being the juxtaposition of those two experiences, ended up being the reason why I talk about culture at work and I talk about Gen Zs in the workplace and like companies hiring me to speak about it, right? And that's ultimately what led me to where I'm at now, which I'm very appreciative of, but it was traumatic, like super traumatic. And so going from having that much toxicity in my life to essentially a lot less, not completely nothing, but a lot less, it was super gratifying. Yeah. Like, I just felt like I could do anything and be anyone I wanted. Like, that is a huge part of it, like being who you want without anyone getting in the way of that and or your path.
And realizing that this is your life.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why are you going to waste your time, waste your energy, waste your emotional bandwidth on people and things that drag you down? Mm-hmm. Like, I know sometimes it's so easy to feel like things are happening to us and we can't control them, but we have to take it upon ourselves to make decisions that are good for us, even if most of the time they're not the easy decision to make. Yeah. They flip our worlds upside down. Yeah. They make us go on a different path than we thought we were supposed to be on, but our happiness is up to us.
I would say also, especially if there is unknown in the air, it's super difficult to deal with. Yeah. Because you're kind of, like, I was straddling being unemployed, the unemployed college grad that everyone dreads becoming. Yep. And being miserable at my job. But not just miserable, like dealing with that toxicity and that level of it. Yeah. And ultimately, I think it's important for anyone. Like, if you're in a position, right, like where you're straddling like the unknown, and I'm sure there are a lot of people right now who are in toxic jobs, who are in toxic relationships, who maybe hate their jobs, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be toxic for you to not be happy. And they can't leave for one reason or another, like safety or security or finance. Yeah. I mean, it's a really tough place to be in. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know that I have all the answers. I know that I left and I got out, and I hopefully will not be in that position again. But I think it ultimately comes down to prioritizing yourself and recognizing that, like, you're in control. Yeah. Of like what is the story that you want to tell?
And if you don't feel like you're in control, why? That's something to explore too. Like, why and what can you do to take back your life? Yeah. I know we also wanted to touch on if you feel like your friend is in a toxic relationship, and this could go for romantic or workplace. What has been your experience with that on either side? And what would you say to someone listening who is witnessing someone they love go through any of these things?
Yeah. So obviously I had a friend come to me early on in that relationship and just say, like, I don't think this is for you. And I didn't listen because I think the delivery was off. Mm-hmm. It was like, you shouldn't be dating this person. And that was it. There was no conversation to be had. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think a better way would have been to say, oh, I'm concerned because this is what happened in their last relationship, or like, here's why, versus just kind of saying like, don't do it.
Right.
But then I was also in the opposite position where I was the friend who thought that I was doing the right thing at the time and expressing my concern in, honestly, I think it was a very respectful way. But that friend ended up telling the boyfriend. Oof. And then I got nearly axed from her life. And that was really tough because that was like a long-term friendship. And I think, and realistically, like she asked me like what I thought of him, and I told her the truth. And I think I wouldn't do that again. But it's a really hard place to be in. Yeah. It's really hard.
It's so hard because this is somebody you care so deeply about and you want the best for them. And oftentimes when we're in a bad situation, we're blind to it. And so it's almost like we have to rely on our friends, and our friends, if they're being like honest, true friends, it's not just for the good times, it's for the bad too. And it's for having those hard conversations. Mm-hmm. But the first thing that someone who's in love and wants it to be happily ever after, the first thing that they're going to do is push you away. And so often I get asked about this, and you never know how your friend is going to react. And I think, you did it in a really good way where you waited for them to ask and then you were honest.
Yeah.
And it still
ended up bad. Yeah. I think what I would have done differently is make it less about the person they're dating and more about how you want them to feel and to not behave, because you're not telling them what to do or what to be, but like telling them and expressing what you're noticing about them when they're around this person, right? Let's say it's, when you're around this person, your light is kind of dimmed, or your funny side doesn't come out at all, or you seem to be quiet, or something along those lines, versus, this person's bad for you, or I don't like him or her, or that.
I don't like how they treat you.
I don't like how they treat you, or like I don't want to be around them. It's a very specific delivery.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably how I would address it. But on the whole, I probably would say less. Like less is more in that situation.
They're going to pick apart everything you say. I think one important thing to add is like, I love you and I support you. And like, if they make you happy, like, great, I'm here. If things go south, I'm also here. I think adding that in of just like, totally. I'm here. But again, like your friend might choose to push you away. They might choose to not tell you about their relationship anymore. And you run that risk. But I think if this is somebody you love and care about, like it's so hard.
I know. But also, like, I think about the friends who stuck by me through that toxic relationship.
Right.
And I think the difference between them and the other friends that maybe I lost or that weren't as supportive, I think it was, now I appreciate them so much because they really did stick by me. They supported me. When we were not together, like, would kind of keep me updated on if like my name was brought up you know, in their world, or
Right.
if if something ever happened, like I knew that they would tell me.
They would have your back.
And they would have my back. And I think that is the type of friend that anyone would want.
Yeah.
But also someone who's honest.
Right. And to the friends listening, like, even if your friend pushes you away, like, don't take it personally. And remember, like, this probably will go south and they will need you. And, like, the toxic relationship that I was in, I pushed all my friends away because they all expressed concern.
Yeah.
And I'm so eternally grateful that when I then did need them and was ready to accept help, they were there for me.
Yeah.
And I'm going through a situation with a friend who she's been seeing somebody who's probably not the type of person she should be with for a lot of reasons. And I think she's been very afraid to open up about it because she's afraid of being judged. And I've been, let's call her Alex. I've been very upfront with her. I'm like, Alex, like, I love you. I can see that this person does make you happy. And all I want is for you to be happy. But I also can't not say that I don't think this is going to end in any way other than you being heartbroken. And I am concerned. At the same time, like, I'm here to, like, gossip with you about it and cheer you on, but also know that, like, I'm a little concerned for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And I'm here for whatever. I'm here for whatever you need. I'm here if you want to, like, talk about it in a fun way. I'm here if you're stressed and, like, scared and hurt. Like, just know that, like, I got you. But I still felt like I needed to say something.
Yeah.
But I also wanted her to be able to talk to me about it.
That's such a good way to do it too, because again, like, people are going to deal with it differently.
Yeah.
And in my case, you know, when I found out at first that he had kissed someone, like, I totally shut down and I became so ashamed. But then once it got to a point where I was sure of my decision of, like, I'm definitely going to end this relationship, at least for that time, I leaned on the people that I was with at the time and opened up to them. And I think when you're in that zone of the unsureness and the feeling stuck is the most vulnerable time and feeling. And I think, to your point, like, people deal with it differently. I've had friends who were in relationships that I thought were going really well, and then turns out, you know, once they break up, like, I hear everything and it was a really unhealthy relationship. And so I think also there is an importance too of checking in with your friends about their relationships and just being curious all the time and just asking, like, oh, how are you and so? Like, are you dealing with anything specific that, like, you want to talk about? Is there, you know, something on your mind that you haven't brought up? Like, I'm here. Like, reminding someone that you are there for them no matter what is such a beautiful thing as a friend, and, like, the best thing that you can do, especially if there are those concerns that you, and then, like, red flags that you spot.
Yeah. And I love that method of, like, asking them how they're doing and asking them and giving them the opportunity to express, like, if something's off.
Yeah.
And they might or they might not, but at least you're trying to have, like, open two-way conversations about it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because everyone deals with it differently. And, like, if you're the type to keep your relationship super to yourself, good for you. Like, that's great. And know that you can choose differently. Like, you can choose to open up to your friends. And I think creating that transparency and that psychological safety between you and a friend, whether you're the one in the relationship or they're the one in the relationship, or you're both in relationships, like, someone needs to be that 51% to just express regularly or once in a blue moon that you are there for them.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for, first of all, like, coming on and talking about this. I know you started by saying you haven't really opened up about your story this much, and I so appreciate it because it's something that so many people go through, and it's really hard to talk about. It's really hard to get through it, And I have no doubt that there were people listening who really needed to hear this conversation.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Before I let you go, I do have one final question. What is the best piece of dating or relationship advice you've ever received or have to give?
Yeah, I would say it's like that classic one that's like, you can only date someone if you're the strongest version of yourself. And like, there's no better relationship than when two people who are whole come together and become one. And so that's really been my focus the past few years. Like, I haven't been in a relationship for like 3.5 years now. And that's really been my focus, is to just strengthen and like become the best version of myself, mentally, physically, spiritually, like focus on my career. Like, I'm 26, like this is the time. Even though both my siblings have gotten married in the past 2 years, like it's been, and that's hard on its own. But I think like, yeah, it's been really important just to focus on me and focus and still date. Like, I'm not closing myself off, but I think definitely putting more emphasis on the me.
Yes, as you should. I mean, this is a whole entire other conversation,
Yeah.
but like spending 3.5, 4.5, 5.5 years of your 20s to like get to know yourself, grow yourself. Like, everybody should do that. And people find so much shame of like, oh, I've been single for so long. It's like, first of all, it's not a long time in the grand scheme of your life. It's not. And second of all, like, at the end of the day, we owe it to ourselves to nourish our relationship with ourselves and to explore who we are and what makes us feel good. And that will help you down the road in a relationship.
Yeah, you have the rest of your life to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
Why
Why
put
rush
off?
it?
Yeah, and like, why put off like prioritizing yourself?
Yeah.
Like, that's only gonna hurt you in the end.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, thank you so much for giving me the space to share. It's definitely, I hope people find that that yik yak type story
Oh my God.
entertaining. It's a good one. It's a good party story that I like to tell. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Where can everybody find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn influencer over there.
Yeah, you are.
Just Danielle Farage, like garage with an F, and my website, daniellefarage.com.
Amazing. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thanks for listening, daters. I hope today's episode made you feel just a little bit less alone out there, no matter what your status might be. Give your finger a break from swiping and hit that follow and review button instead. And if you have any burning questions or want to share your own unfiltered dating stories, reach out to seeingotherpeoplepodcast@gmail.com. And in the meantime, keep on seeing other people.